Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our special transmission on the visit of the Prime Minister in the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. As we all know that the Prime Minister spoke for well over 45 minutes today. I'm talking about 45 minutes, and he discussed almost all the important issues, starting from the climate change to the money laundering issue. He also talked about in detail about this concept of Islamophobia, and also the most important part of his speech was about Kashmir. He discussed in detail and talked about the past, the present and the future consequences. Did discuss in detail about the miseries of the Kashmiri people and the kind of problems they are going through at the moment. It's been 55 days now that the curfew has been imposed in Kashmir, and there is an acute shortage of food, drinking water, medicines, even the medical facilities. More than 13,000 youngsters, they've been picked up and they've been sent to various jails all over India. People are worried, people are exhausted, and people need some relief. This is exactly what the Prime Minister talked about the issue. We will be talking about all these major 4 points, but since the sequence was about the climate change first, and then about the terror financing issue, and then about Islamophobia, and the last but the most important part was about Kashmir. But we'll start the program from Kashmir, and we'll also talk about this concept of Islamophobia, and then we'll talk about climate change and the terror financing, according to the importance of the overall concept behind the speech. Now, to talk about this, we have with us in our studio. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Dr. Professor Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab. Needs no introduction, is the head of IR in Quaid-e-Azam University. Dr. Saab is also an author, writer, columnist. Sir, thank you very much. And we have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Faisal Saab, who is the Vice Chancellor of Air University, Islamabad, and AVM Saab is also a senior analyst. Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Saab, first of all, sir, say plain simple question about the speech, sir. A pretty comprehensive speech for well over 45 minutes, major areas of the primary concerns. They were all discussed. So your take.
I think that when you examine Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations General Assembly today, what you have to notice, I noticed number one, selection of the words, that was very perfect. Selection of the facts and analogy with the history and with the present, that was very correct. And thirdly, he targeted all those 4 issues which are posing challenge not to you and me alone, but to the entire world. If you look about this climate issue, it's not challenge only for Pakistan, it's a challenge for the entire world. If you talk about the money laundering from the developed states, from developing state to developed state, and Prime Minister very confidently gave the references because he know what is the West, and he on their turf he went and he targeted them, that you people are doing this thing. Third, in the speech when he referred about this Islamophobia, he excellently explained. And we haven't seen in the last 20 years, the Muslims have been, you can say, beaten with this Islamophobia or Islamic terrorism or these kind of things. Not even a single Muslim world leader has taken up, but he has explained. He explained the causes of the radicalization. He told that what is going to happen in the future if you put 1.3 billion Muslims and put them in this kind of condition like Kashmir. So then he has also talked about finally on the Kashmir, and in the Kashmir he told very much at the end where he gave a logical demands, very logical demands, as well as of the United States Assistant State Secretary also endorsed what he demanded there. But at the same time, what was the main, I think the final word was very clear, that we as a Pakistani desire peace. We wanted to solve the issues through the dialogue. But our desire for the peace, or whatever he narrated in the last 1 year, he tried to ensure the peace in the region, it is not the weakness of the Pakistan. And there he alarmed or sensitized the entire world that if you have adopted a appeasing policy, which in 1938 in the Munich conference, they adopted appeasing policy to Adolf Hitler, and then 39 World Wars. So this appeasing policy, this time again, they're going to take the entire world.
These 2 nuclear powers.
And then he said that this time it will be not, we will be not only the sufferer, the entire world will be suffering.
I mean, that exactly you rightly pointed out about the last minute of his speech was really important.
And finally, I here wanted to add before we go for the further, Look, in the previous years, for example, I was recalling 2 years back, Sushma Swaraj was alleging, proving, everyone thinking, oh, Pakistan is a terror-sponsored state. Today, Prime Minister on the same place, and he explained them, he said, Google. He said, Yadaveda Vedas, who is a terrorist? And that is a message which
So he
came.
defended Pakistani case very well. He also highlighted the Kashmiri cause in an
Very
equal
much.
manner. AVM Saab, I'm sure you must have gone through the entire speech, sir. What is your take on it, sir?
Well, he chose 4 topics that were close to his heart. And he has been speaking while in Pakistan about those same topics. So there was nothing that surprised you in that session at the UNGA. He also spoke about the same topics at the various sideline meetings and sideline talks with the think tanks. So much so that all the analogies and all the references and phrases were almost similar. But you could find a bit more of a passion, a bit more of conviction in his delivery, that he put the entire conviction behind his speech. So that was what probably moved. Though I would say that he spoke a bit long. On couple of topics, he dragged his argument a bit longer. That is primarily is the danger when you do not speak from a written text. When you speak from extempore, then you have the chances of repeating yourself, and he fell victim to that. But when you look at the entire speech, the topics that he chose are, as I will agree, they are the universal topics.
And the content?
The content, again, he was mindful in the beginning of the time. So he gave a limited time to the first 2 topics that he spoke on, the topic on the climate change and topic on the money laundering. But he went beyond much time in many of those when he was handling the Islamophobia and then Kashmir. And actually his main thrust was on Kashmir. And I would agree that he spoke at length, and it actually rung an alarm bell in my mind when he spoke so elaborately, and he said, this is not a threat, this is a worry, this is a fear.
Absolutely.
That these things are going to happen. Now, I was thinking, is it that they have some news, some intelligence of the Indian plans, or some inkling that they have, and he was telling the world, this is going to happen and this is going to lead you to war. It is time for you to stop it now. That was alarming. Not his threat, but the conviction with which he said. And
he in fact said it is a fair worry, not a threat.
Yeah. And the other thing was that he actually informed the world, informed the global leadership, informed the people present in the UNGA about the likely bloodbath that is likely to take place when the curfew is lifted. And this is what we have been talking, all of us have been talking around here, that what will happen when the curfew is lifted. I think they're going to kill thousands and thousands of them, and there will be genocide. This is what we've been talking, and I think he took the public's worries, public's fear to UNGA and gave it a voice. I think that is the voice of the entire country, that the entire country, without the political divide, people here are worried about the genocide that's going to take place in Kashmir. Now more so when the American Miss Alice Wells has asked from the US, they've asked the India to lift the curfew and release all the political prisoners. I think India would find, and one of the programs that I had said that probably will find after the UNGA session, India would lift the curfew, because they were waiting that there should be no disturbances during, well, Mr. Modi is there and he is enjoying the honeymoon in Howdy Moody, but probably after that they are going to lift the curfew. And this is what very precisely Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Now that's a very important point.
That's
so
the very
we'll
point that
talk
he
about
made
that.
it, that there is going to be genocide, and very soon, probably in next week or so, when this India is more
even
under
prior
pressure.
to that, if something like Pulwama happens,
Yeah.
things can take a very different turn, sir, and could lead anywhere. Now, Dr. Saab, if you allow me, sir, we've been joined in by Imran Jan Saab from United States of America, and let's see what Jan Saab has to share with us as far as the overall understanding of the speech is concerned, plus also the mood of the people and what exactly is going on as far as the media of United States of America is concerned. Jan Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum Assalam ji, how are you?
Jan Saab, thank you very much, sir, for taking out your time and talking to us. First of all, sir, I listened to the entire speech, took the notes, and I spoke to a lot of people, even in my newsroom, and everybody was happy about the speech. And one of our very good colleague, in fact, said this wasn't a speech only from the Pakistani leader. It seemed as if Imran Khan was representing the entire Muslim Ummah and he was talking for 1.3 billion Muslims. Let's start off from there, sir. Your take.
Okay, so first of all, allow me to express my gratitude for such a great speech that Imran Khan gave. I can now walk around American cities and, talk to my American friends and tell them, this is my leader who doesn't talk for 45 minutes without reading from a piece of paper, because that was a norm in our country before. Even normal conversations were happening reading from a piece of paper. So that was great. And at the same time, as you mentioned, the people that you quoted from your newsroom, yes, that's the true Imran Khan that people love. That is the true Imran Khan who spoke not just on behalf of Pakistan, but at the same time on behalf of the entire Muslim community. Allow me a few minutes to explain the mood, and the mood here, and also at the same time, what is it that I personally saw that made me very happy. It was unprecedented for a leader of a developing country to talk about climate change. He actually started his speech with that. That is that is great. And then I want to talk about the two most important issues that I found very interesting. One was the issue of terrorism, and the other one was about the tax safe havens, the hidden offshore accounts that the rich countries tolerate and allow because it benefits them. So on the issue of terrorism, this wasn't just a speech. What Imran Khan did was he spoke truth to the power. That's the most important part of this whole speech. He reminded the Western society that this radical Islam, there is no such thing as Islam, radical Islam. There's only one Islam, as he said. So this radical Islam, this so-called radical Islam, is a creation of your society. You created this extreme Islam, this jihad, to counter the Soviet communist influence back in the Cold War because it served your interests. I want to also remind here that the University of Nebraska, in collusion with the CIA, published books about jihad, teaching radical jihad, where the alphabet K stood for Kalashnikov and R stood for Russian, and the sentence was made, use the Kalashnikov and kill the Russian. That was the kind of literacy that the University of Nebraska and the CIA was giving these people in Afghanistan. That's one example. Then 9/11 happened. These radical Islamists turned against the West, and then all of a sudden they had to change course, and all of a sudden jihad became their enemy. So that was important for Imran Khan to remind the world community that we have got nothing to do with it, and actually Pakistan has been paying the price because of what you did. So that was important. Secondly, which is very also important, and the issue of the tax havens. Before I explain that, I want to tell you about a little fable, old story. It's about Saint Augustine, who narrates a conversation between a king, an emperor, and a pirate. The pirate was stealing from huge navy ships from the seas, on different parts of the seas. So the king's army captures the pirate and brings him in front of the emperor. The emperor says, "How dare you molest the sea?" The pirate says, "Well, how dare you molest the whole world? Because I do it with a small boat, I'm called a thief. But you do it with large navies, you're called an emperor. You and I do the same thing, except you do it on a much larger scale." That's very important. That's exactly what Imran Khan reminded the world, that if there is money laundering happening for, let's say, terrorism financing, then you put so much restrictions on us that I, by the way, as a Pakistani American, I can buy a SIM card and open a bank account in this country very easily. But when I go to Pakistan, it's a nightmare to open a bank account. It's a nightmare to get a SIM card in my phone. It's all because of these restrictions, because of terrorism financing. But you allow safe havens for the hidden money that so many large corporations are hiding their money in. For example, Apple is hiding billions of dollars in offshore accounts. because, and as Imran Khan reminded the world, because it benefits you. In poor countries, when leaders steal money, corrupt leaders steal money, that money ends up in Western societies, buying off expensive properties, investing in businesses. It benefits you, so don't talk about that because that benefits you, although that's a much larger crime. So again, I am happy that Imran Khan stood up there and spoke truth to the power and reminded the world community how much of a hypocrite, basically, that was a slap, not just in the face of Modi, but at the same time, in the
Kashmir
face
issue
of
was
any country.
properly handled and all on the floor of the House, sir?
Absolutely. Very well handled. Unprecedented, I would say. Very happy.
Now, sir, John, stay with us. We have with us in our studio Air Vice Marshal Faiz Amir, and we also have with us Dr. Professor Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab. So we'll continue our discussion from Islamabad also. Now, Jaspal Saab, another very important point. Since we're talking about the Kashmir issue, the facts and figures were given to them, and they were told that, you know, Indians in particular are trying to paint the picture of Kashmir as if there are terrorists there and they are blowing bombs left, right and center, though it's not happening out there. It's the other way around, where 900,000 troops are practically caging 8 million people, and that practically, if you count it, comes down to one soldier against one family, sir. Now, that's a huge number. So in certain conditions, I mean, statements coming from the other side of the border, and then the Prime Minister talking about this particular issue in detail and telling them that this is what is happening. So primarily, sir, there are two angles. One is about the Kashmir issue, which he said people need to look into as far as the self-determination is concerned. Prior to that, he also talked about the release of those innocent people who are in various jails. And the first and the foremost point was about lifting the curfew. Now, looking at this statement and relating it what Alice Wells said earlier, how do you see? Do you think that something has been done or something is in process?
I think that we have to take three things together. One, the opening speech of the United Nations General Assembly Secretary. Second, the Trump speech and the Trump's press conference. And third, Alice Wells. In all these three, there was one reference to the deplorable, condemnable conditions in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. Second, in the first two, you had also seen that they directly, indirectly referred what is the danger. And in the present speech of the Prime Minister, and it is very much open secret. A few days back in the India's Today newspaper, they narrated what the General Bapan has stated 2-3 days back. He said that 500 trained terrorists are back in the Balakot and they are heading towards Indian-occupied Kashmir. Then what the 900,000 plus troops are doing in the Indian But there's another thing. He made a statement that this time we are not going to repeat the Balakot, but we go beyond. So I think the Prime Minister has very rightly pointed out or conveyed the message to the international community, or through the international community to the Indian as well, that you cannot expect from us non-retaliation. We are going to retaliate. The situation will escalate. The other point was that in this context, when you are looking that how much it will be or he will be able to convince. My understanding is that the statement coming from the RSS from the United States, just see 2-3 days back what you are seeing in the Houston. What you are looking that the Americans are very much interested in the Indian economic market, or they wanted to maintain a strategic partner. A bigger game is there. The bigger game is that the Americans are looking India in the Asia Pacific as an ally. In this Asia Pacific strategic, or that's what they, but at the same time, they are compelled by not their strategic or economic, but they're compelled by the common people in the United States. They are who are demonstrating. That's why they made this. She made this statement: curfew should be lifted. Now here comes the other important problem. The problem is, which Prime Minister Imran Khan referred in his speech.
Do you think the Americans have actually felt the level of the issue within?
No, this is an important point. Which we have to not. In the United States, if you see the United States foreign and strategic policy, United States, you can say rhetoric in the international setting or in the international community, values, human rights, In the last 50 days, we are not hearing much from the United States on these issues. So their own public is now protesting. So that is the point which we have to not miss. And that is the only reason since August 5, all segments of the Pakistani society, I cannot here only say the government, the media, experts, they are hammering this issue. They are raising this issue. And the issue is now becoming very much popular and sensitized. People started realizing what is happening in Kashmir. Look, just 13,000 children from the age of 16 to 36 years of age, they have been picked from their homes only for 5 districts, small towns in the Kashmir. Who reported? India's own organization, women's organization which went to the Kashmir for fact finding, they said, and the people don't know, these 13,000 young children, they are picked by RSS or the other. And here comes the Prime Minister's reference to the RSS. Even what the Prime Minister said, that the Congress leader, Congress minister said, the RSS camps are terrorist training camps.
And he also mentioned that
and then
Narendra Modi is the life member
of the RSS, and then he drew an analogy. And West, look, it's very interesting. If the Jewish are talking about Holocaust, who brought the Holocaust? Khakis, Nazis. What was their dress?
Brown.
Same RSS is
what
there.
you're wearing, Dr. Saab.
So that was that is the point
Dr.
which,
Saab,
which we are trying to bring into it. So, but this point is very
Dr. Saab,
important.
practically this has this relationship because we know about
There's
the
a very much analogy.
saffron band which they
No,
normally
the
wear.
founder of the RSS
So
was very
they
much
used to wear a proper
influenced
bush
by the-
shirt with 4
Yeah,
pockets
he
and
was
brown,
very much
yeah?
influenced by the, you can say, Nazis.
So is it based on
Yeah,
that?
and then that's why in this speech, I think that the facts, analogies, references, and prediction about the future.
All right.
And that prediction about the future is what the Prime Minister said. And he gave the example that you talk about the jihad or these kind of the things and the suicidal bombers, but what the Tamils were doing, they were the Hindus. Why you are not talking about this? So it means
Nobody related it to Hinduism
Yeah.
or the religion for that matter.
And second point which he brought in this he said that the cause of radicalization, why this Dar was radicalized, who blew on 14th February. He told that his father said for 1 year he was in the custody of the Indian Armed Forces.
beaten,
He was
physically,
radicalized,
mentally
militarized.
abused.
He was there. And then he gave the example. He said, if you keep me for 50 days in this kind of a cage, what would be my thinking? I will be thinking it's better to die rather than to live. So these are the things which he tried to, he presented there. And definitely, if we continue on these things, he has presented a case very appropriately in this case.
All right.
And finally, I think that whether they will be sensitized or not, that is the final reference. That if you are not going to act, if you are continuing to appeasing the Indians, the way the Hitler was appeased by the Europeans in the 1938, what were the consequences? And the consequences were Second World War. And similarly, if you continue with this kind of policy for the sake of your peace, for the sake of
is
your,
going to lead to
your
another war, that is
political
going
or
to third
economic
war, yes.
object pursuits, definitely you are going to bigger crisis, and that is a
All
nuclear.
right. All right. Evim sir, if you allow me, sir, I was just told by my producer that we have another guest on the telephone line, sir. We'll just have his opinion and then I'll come to you. We have with us Ambassador Jamil Ahmed Khan, sir. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
I'm sure, sir, you must have heard the speech of the Prime Minister Imran Khan in the UNGA, sir. Your take on it, sir. How comprehensive was it as far as the diplomatic standards are concerned? So your take.
Well, he has covered 2 aspects of diplomacy very well. There are basically 3 tiers of diplomacy, main tiers of diplomacy. Tier number 1 is public diplomacy, 2 is traditional diplomacy, and 3 is legal diplomacy. So 2 aspects in his speech he has covered very well. Number 1, that he has been able to muster the, if not support, at least he's been able to form the opinion of world leaders and the also the concerned people in the world who are keeping an eye in this region in particular. And once I say so, I mean that he has sensitized the entire world about the way things are developing. He has given a complete sequence of the development, and for example, he has given, I'm coming the last culminating point which he said, he was very clear that if it comes to, or if we are marginalized, or if we are pushed against the wall, then there would be no option but to fight back. And he gave the example of a country which is 7 times bigger. If they feel that the smaller country would be able to surrender, he has very clearly and categorically pointed out that we are going to fight till death, or any nation for that matter. And finally, the most important point which he has been able to philosophically put across, and that is the nuclear flashpoint. Previously, there was a between the line, eyeball to eyeball, two nuclear countries, two nuclear states. Today, with logic and with the sequence he wanted to put across his point, he has been able to sensitize the world that if the war, conventional war, because you might have heard about the Cold Start doctrine by the Indian Chief of Army Staff some time back, and the rhetoric which they've been really putting across. And so, from that point of view, he first mentioned that a bigger country, 7 times bigger, if they try and enter into a conventional war, no one knows then what is the end of it, and the world has to intervene at this stage, at this point. If the world fails to intervene, then the consequences are going to be very disastrous, and it would affect the entire world. And as you would know, the scientists have already, they have the calculation. If a nuclear device is used in any part of the world, between the two countries or any country unilaterally, it impacts the entire world within 7 days' time. Because its radiation and the smoke which goes into the air is about 50 kilometers in the air, and all the scientific data, I have it with me in my mind. But then that's the point which has been already raised by so many think tanks of United States and other countries. And what he did was today that those very important points which the think tanks have been mentioning through their papers, through discussion, through seminar and workshop, he has
All right.
been able to put it across
So
in front
what
of
I've
the head of
understood,
state.
sir, Basit Saab, is that primarily the Prime Minister, in your point of view, in your opinion, amicably and very appropriately presented all the 4 points and in fact raised the Kashmir issue. Thank you very much, sir. Now, sir.
I think I'll take 3 points.
Sir.
First of all, let's talk a bit more about his fear, his worry about the next Pulwama getting into a full-fledged war and that leading to a horrible tragedy. Just last week, there was the U.S. National Security Archives. They released a report of 1962, and they call it Single Integrated Operating Plan. And that plan, it was the actual plan the Americans had to bomb nuke various communist bloc countries, including China, Russia, and the Warsaw Pact countries. And that integrated plan actually gives a target list of 1,200 targets that the Americans had outlined to destroy in the communist bloc. But the most important thing was that while they were targeting the military targets, there was 355 million people were to be killed. So that is the magnitude of the nuclear holocaust that the world could have faced then, and world is still staring into that nuclear holocaust in subcontinent. And that is very aptly, I think, the Prime Minister brought out that don't forget what happened in the Cold War or the fears of the Cold War, that every day there was talk about nuclear weapons, and there were various degrees of varying doctrines, nuclear doctrines, but that threat still exists today. And if you don't know, it is here that I am telling you. The second point was, which I found very interesting, is the repeated mention of the Pakistan army training the Mujahideen to fight against the communist. Now, this admission itself comes from a man who has a conviction to tell the people that, look, we did this, but we are changing now. We have changed. He said that I have removed all the militant groups from my country. So he said, while I admit that we did that, we trained the Mujahideen to fight the communists, and you left them behind us, behind.
Not once, twice.
Not twice. So now, but he says that, believe me, that we have undone all those, almost all those groups that you left for us. So this is very important, and this admission or this emphasis he has been giving time and again throughout his last 7 days. He's been saying, yes, we trained them. We trained the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviets, but you left them behind, and then we called them terrorists. So this is a very important point, and some people objected
remember,
to it.
sir, Hillary Clinton, who's been the former Secretary of State, has been the First Lady also. She has openly admitted and talked about it on the floor of the House in USA, sir.
And people objected to this, his repeated reference to this. Third point, I would like to draw a reference between his speech and Modi's speech. Both the leaders touched on the UN, on the climate change. But Mr. Khan was more emphatic by giving his own example of the previous government that he headed in KPK and his current targets, that he has a tangible target to meet, and he's just not talking about climate change, but he is setting an example for advanced countries to follow him. The other thing was, both the leaders talked about terrorism. Now, Mr. Modi talked about terrorism in general. He lamented that the world is not united against terrorism. But what Mr. Khan did was, he's talked about the state terrorism. And he talked about the state terrorism, which is so evident that the state terrorism has terrorized 8 million people. And what he has said and what he's been saying is, probably the entire Western print media and electronic media has been talking about it. And what Mr. Modi was referring to when he talked about Pakistan, or he talked about from where the terrorism originates, Mr. Trump said, I don't care, in his presence. He mentioned twice, I don't care, I don't mind. So what I mean is that his narrative has gone old now. But what is
They have to sell something new now.
Something new now. And what Mr. Khan presented was that it's a state terrorism. It is 8 million people that you have held for the last 54 days or 53 days. You have held them without food, without medicine. You have picked up 13,000 people. You have raped 70,000 women. So there's a large list that Mr. Khan presented. And one more thing. Mr. Modi, or probably his speech writers, they feared that Imran Khan is going to refer back to 1925 and 1927.
And maybe they also knew the communication skills were pretty good.
And 1939, the appeasement. So they also picked up one quotation from 125 years back from one of the Hindu leaders, where he was referring to harmony and peace. But actually in his mind was that, yes, my party comes 125 years back, 100 years back, and we have been talking about harmony and peace. While Mr. Imran Khan has been telling again and again that 100 years back in 1925 and in 1939, this is the parties that they bring in the fascist ideology, and they
had a certain plan.
So Mr. Modi's writers were worried about the repeated narration of a narrative Mr. Imran Khan has been able to build up.
Sir, let's go to USA. Now, Jan Saab, another very important aspect when the Prime Minister was talking on the floor of the House in UNGA, he mentioned about Islamophobia. He tried to explain that. And earlier the question I had put for you was about him being presented as not only the leader of Pakistan, but the leader of the Muslim Ummah. Now, sir, no other country practically has raised all these concerns. You know, everybody spoke about their certain interest or their vested interest. But over here, we saw Khan actually highlighting the issues which I think the other 56 countries or those members of the OIC should also have been talking about. That radicalization, how it is cropped up, it needs a certain environment, it needs a certain sort of conditions, I would say, where it can really ripe well. My point now, sir, that do you believe that the tomorrow papers in United States of America, or maybe the radio programs or the electronic media, is going to highlight these major important components of the speech, sir? Do you think these will become the headlines? Will it create some sort of an impact? Will it be a part of the debate tomorrow as well, sir, amongst many leaders?
I seriously doubted that it would make to the front pages of the leading publications like the New York Times and Washington Post, because they are heavily consumed by what is happening between U.S. and Ukraine right now. You know, the impeachment proceedings, the inquiry of impeachment against President Trump because of that phone call between President Zelensky and President Trump. I don't believe that anything major will appear on the front pages in the next few days of these major publications. But nevertheless, the issues highlighted by Imran Khan are important not just to Pakistan or the Muslim Ummah, at the same time, the whole world. I want to explain actually that point, but before that, the most important part of what Imran Khan said today and in the days before was actually, because I just want to show this picture, if the camera can capture it. This is a picture of President Reagan and the Mujahideen leaders. This was a meeting between them at the White House back in the 80s. And Imran Khan pointed out, because I had been speaking about this for a long time with my American friends, Imran Khan pointed out by explaining that you, the Western society, created this mess. He reminded the West that these people were equated with the founding fathers of the United States. President Reagan called these people as equivalents of the founding fathers of the United States.
Yes,
you know, I always look at this picture and I wonder which one of these is Thomas Jefferson and which one would be George Washington. They don't look like them, by the way. So the important part is that Imran Khan, while speaking up there, reminded the Western society of the hypocrisy and the double standard and how this is a creation of the West. But again, it is sad that it may not make the major news in this country. One more important issue is why the United States and the Western society in general must not ignore what is happening in Kashmir. As was mentioned here, and Imran Khan mentioned it too, that 8 million people are living in a virtual open-air prison. It's not even an open-air prison. It's a complete lockdown now. And close to 1 million Indian soldiers are deployed there so that those people could be controlled. Remember, Al-Qaeda turned against the United States and attacked the United States. One of the major reasons was, in Al-Qaeda becoming anti-US, was because of the US tacit and not very tacit support for Israel. And Israel was committing all kinds of atrocities. India is doing the same today in Kashmir. And the United States choosing to look the other way is doing it only at its own peril, because it's always this anger that expresses itself in all kinds of forms. Terrorism is one of them. Remember, and Imran Khan in an indirect way reminded the world this very important aspect. Terrorism is a big issue, but what is a much bigger issue is aggression, because aggression creates terrorism. You stop aggression, you will stop terrorism. You kill the roots of terrorism. And what India is doing is aggression, and it is going to create terrorism. And it will not be a distant day in future, God forbid, that it will reach the Western society because of, again, the US and the West choosing to look the other way when India is indulged in all kinds of these atrocities, just like what the Israelis were doing. That's exactly why, as I mentioned, Al-Qaeda turned against the United States. So it's good that Imran Khan is reminding the people not to ignore this issue, because if they do, the results can be catastrophic. This is not a small issue. It is very serious, and it is much urgent. Just like climate change, it is much urgent than what the U.S. media is consumed with right now.
Handled on ASAP basis. All right. Dr. Saab, if I say that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan, overshadowed Prime Minister of Modi in this 74th session of the UNGA, do you think this is a correct statement, sir?
I think it's a very correct statement. He not only overshadowed the Prime Minister Modi, but he overshadowed the entire represent us there, because he came up with the global issues, and at the same time within those global issues he highlighted his own country's problem and also the regional problems and the challenges which the entire international community, including the region, the South Asian region, has been facing. I think the context or you can say within the speech, the way he presented or articulated the facts and the narrative he tried to build, that is very much important. And there is, if you see that, is any important issue has been missed in that? No, nothing has been missed in his speech. And then when we look about this kind of the things, when you make a comparison, look, Prime Minister Modi was only selling the agenda of shining India, which and India's economy has declined.
They are unable to gather the kind of investment they were looking at,
Yeah,
sir. So
it's gone up to the 5.
Yes, sir.
So the picture has been
GDP
exposed.
is currently
And
under 5.
So that is important. Then he was not there to bash India, but he was narrating what is happening in this entire situation. And I think in this context, he was very successful. He was successful. Maybe he had a Western exposure. He had he is able to speak. He had made he
communication
strategized.
skills
And
also.
if you see that he sensitized the international community in the last 6 to 7 days, systematically, speaking at all the important think tanks in New York, meeting the leaders, giving the
sidelines of the-
interviews.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, when he announced that I'm going for one mission, when he started his speech, and during his speech, he also referred that I'm here not for just visit or just to make a speech. I'm here with an agenda. And my agenda is to inform you people and from the United Nations to remind the members of the United
correct, sir.
Nations that it's your responsibility, your resolution which have been violated. Indian constitution has been violated. Indian, you can say a rogue regime is in India. And he also mentioned that you yourself has cancelled his visas. What are your people talking? I think
that
it's
man was not
intellectually.
granted visa then.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that now, since he's become the Prime Minister, he's no more the same person.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed, sir. Moving on to you, sir. Now, one word is overshadowed. The second is, sir, do you think the PM was able to do and deliver whatever we were expecting from him, sir?
Yes, I think he left many messages in throughout his visit and in his speech more so. And one of the important message that he told Mr. Modi, that you have 180 million Muslims, and if you continue to antagonize and oppress and suppress the Muslims, then you may be creating a problem for yourself within your own country. And you are likely to blame us for that problem as well. I think that's a very important message, a gauntlet that he said through to Mr. Modi. Other thing that he told the global leadership, that it was the UN that gave a special status to Kashmir. It's the responsibility of the UN to ensure that special
11
status.
resolutions, sir.
Yeah, that special status is maintained. And his closing remark was, it was the UN that promised plebiscite to the people of Kashmir. So I think these are the very important messages. And what you see is that from almost a dormant issue, a dormant subject, today I think the entire Twitter, the most sought after or most tweeted account is about the speech of Mr. Imran Khan. So he has brought this issue actually alive.
Now he's been considered as the most influential leaders in the Muslim world also, sir.
So he has
that
also
carries
he's
a lot
also
of- a
brought
lot of value.
He's also
Indeed.
brought Pakistan into the limelight.
Absolutely.
And two important things that he gained, but he did not mention, was his the approach of USA and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to mediate in Iran. He did not mention in his speech because he probably thought that these 4 topics that they were very close to his heart. And the second was Afghanistan. He spoke to CBC and he spoke to other American TVs. He spoke a lot about
obviously, sir,
Afghanistan.
I think Pakistan has to play a much greater role
So
as far as
so
diffusing tension between
he
Iran
was
and
able,
USA and then on the other
he
side.
was able not only to bring Kashmir to the
main
limelight,
forum, yes.
but he was also able to gain that importance of Pakistan
Correct.
that we were longing for a very long
All right,
time.
sir. All right. Over to you now. Jan Saab, your concluding remarks. Now, one point which is very important, that whatever he has said, he meant it. And whatever he said it from his heart. Now, when it comes to this very important issue, I'm not talking about Kashmir, I'm talking about this Islamophobia. And this it prevails not only in the Western world and elsewhere, wherever you talk about. And unfortunately, Muslims are being marginalized. You live abroad, you live in the Western world, and I'm sure you also feel the same. Do you think this speech will, I'm not saying at a macro level or even at a micro level, will make any difference? Do you think this debate will start about this issue?
Oh yes, absolutely. The debate will. The debate, if it hasn't been started before, it will definitely start with his speech, or it will help, resurrect this issue if it was dead. Of course, Imran Khan's speech, because the whole world is watching, and even if, as I mentioned, the major publications don't cover it on their front pages, they cannot completely ignore what he said, everything that he said. So absolutely, it will be projected. And at the same time, as was mentioned before, Prime Minister Imran Khan, I believe, is the second most Googled world leader right now. So that does a lot for Pakistan, because if people Google this person, where is he from? What country is going to be to come with his name? Pakistan. And it's funny, but I have personal reasons to be happy with this, because as much as his name is mentioned in the media, many of my American friends have trouble pronouncing my name. You know how it is. You've lived in the West, Faisal. So they'll now finally be able to say my name correctly. But that apart, yes, Imran Khan touched upon a very important issue of the rising extremism and the rising hatred. Hatred right now is probably the ideology in the world that can claim more followers than any other religion or ideology. People hate, there's so much hate in the world. Hatred against Muslims, Jews, non-Hindus in India, for example.
Teaches us hatred or maybe no religion. This is what also mentioned by Mr. Khan, that Tamil tigers were bombing Sri Lanka and they were Hindus. But the Hindu religion should not be blamed for this. This was like I think this is the wisest element. Anyway, Ansab, thank you very much for your participation in our show. Avim Sir, was a pleasure. Dr. Sir, thank you so much for your participation. We'll continue our transmission after this short break. Stay with us.